The killers of Limerick father of two, Jason Corbett, are set for an earlier prison release. Father and daughter Tom and Molly Martens, who killed Mr. Corbett in 2015, as you know, accepted a plea bargain deal with North Carolina prosecutors for voluntary manslaughter. Now, to explain what's going on, I'm joined by Ralph Riegel, the Southern Correspondent of the Irish Independent. Ralph, good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
Now, first of all, what's going on? I mean, there was toing and froing. There was a leak that they might get a really early release. And then when that was exposed, that was cancelled. And then they were set for release sometime in late June. What's changed?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Pat. What is going on over there? And the simple answer is that no one really seems to be sure. I mean, certainly the family here in Limerick, and I mean, they were absolutely taken by surprise yesterday to learn that Tom and Molly Martens were supposed to get out after serving an additional 7 months behind bars. Your listeners will probably remember that they were convicted in 2017 of the second-degree murder of Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old Irish widower. Tom is a retired FBI agent and a former counterintelligence operative. His daughter Molly had met Mr. Corbett when she travelled to Ireland to work as a nanny for his two children, with his wife having died of a respiratory problem about 2 years beforehand. They were convicted in 2017. They were given 20 to 25 years in prison for Mr. Corbett's second-degree murder. They challenged that to the Court of Appeal and then to the Supreme Court in North Carolina, which quashed the convictions and ordered a retrial. But then dramatically last October, Tom and Molly reached a plea bargain agreement with the prosecutors in North Carolina. They agreed to admit Mr. Corbett's voluntary manslaughter, but in return, the state would drop the murder charges. Now, they had served 3 years and 8 months behind bars before they won their appeal. And Judge David Hall, having considered all of the evidence, which included very, very dramatic victim impact statements from Mr. Corbett's sister Tracy, other members of his family, but most specifically Mr. Corbett's two children, Jack and Sarah, he imposed a further 7 months behind bars. That happened on November the 8th. And then dramatically, as you say, in December it emerged that Tom and Molly were due to get out within days. The North Carolina Department of Corrections insisted that that release date was correct, despite a major furore, not just in Ireland, but within the US as well, on the basis that how could two people who got 7 months behind bars be released literally within 4 weeks? It then emerged that that was a mistake. The North Carolina Department of Corrections said it was down to a miscalculation of parole data by the Central Records Office, which is based in Raleigh, in the capital of North Carolina. And then we were told they were going to get out on June the 27th. Everyone assumed that that was a date that was written in stone. And then, lo and behold, the family were informed yesterday by a victim support group based on information supplied to them from the state that Tom's release date had been brought forward by 3 weeks. Instead of being released on June the 27th, he was now going to be released on June the 6th. And I should point out, Molly's release date is still stated to be June the 27th, but everyone expects that her release date will also be brought forward to coincide with that of her father.
Now, to try and understand what's going on, the idea of a plea bargain, we don't have them here, although sometimes on foot of an agreement to plead to manslaughter, a murder charge may be dropped, the murder charge taking with it always a mandatory life sentence. So sometimes people are persuaded to avoid a trial and avoid all the heartbreak that goes with the trial for the family of a victim, be it a murder or manslaughter. To avoid all that, if there's a guilty plea, the charge may be reduced to manslaughter. Doesn't mean the sentence will be any less, by the way. In Ireland, you can still get life for manslaughter. But we don't really understand the way the justice system works in the US. We see it on television, but it seems to be a lot of wheeling and dealing.
Yes, it's a very different system. And I think a lot of it is based on the fact that, I mean, in some states in the US, particularly when it comes to retrials, up to 70% of cases are settled on the basis of a plea bargain. I think firstly is the fact that there is such a backlog of cases in the US, particularly after COVID, that there's serious pressure on the judicial system. I think secondly, it's a very different system because if you look here, we don't have judges that are elected in Ireland. They're elected in the US. You also have district attorneys that are up for election. So a lot of it is that People look at the costs involved in cases. They looked at public opinion. They look at what taxes people have to pay to support judicial proceedings. All of that, I think, filters into how cases are handled. And in this particular case, I think what happened was you had a retrial of a major international crime. The difficulty, I think, in North Carolina was that they thought that this retrial could last anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks. And that was the concern. I think it was costs. There was obviously evidential issues which were of a concern as well. And the plea bargain deal, it obviously suited Tom and Molly Martens. They were getting a much lower offence that they could plead to. And secondly, in terms of the duration, a second-degree murder trial or murder conviction carries between 20 and 25 years in prison for first-time offenders, whereas you can see for this voluntary manslaughter, Tom and Molly are essentially going to get away with a 4-year and 3-month prison sentence.
Yeah. Now, this current shortening, are they explaining why they get 3 weeks extra remission, if you like? Is it good behaviour, or is it, Tom, an old FBI guy, old pals act?
There's been no explanation offered, Pat, but I mean, as you say, there's a number of factors that can feed into it. Firstly is an inmate's behaviour behind bars. Secondly, it could be their engagement with various in-prison programs in terms of reform and parole. It can be their age. It can be their prior work history. It can even be the state of their health. All of those things can feed into it, and they all appear to have fed into it in terms of Tom Martens. It's also worth noting that in the sentencing hearing, a lot was made of the fact that Tom Martens was a retired FBI agent, that he had, I think, 3 decades of honourable service, that he had worked as a counterintelligence operative in the US Department of Energy, that he had fought to protect the security of the United States, and to the point where his service was actually acknowledged and commented on by the judge in the sentencing hearing. So the very fact that those things are now playing in his favour really doesn't come as a surprise to anyone.
All right, Ralph, thank you very much for joining us. Ralph Riegel, who's Southern Correspondent for the Irish Independent.